Hey guys, tonight we're going to sneak below deck, past the damp hammocks and rum-stained laughter, into one of the most underrated corners of a pirate ship, the kitchen. Or, to be a bit more nautical, the galley. You're going to stand barefoot, on a slanted timber floor, ducking under beams that were probably never meant for anyone taller than 5'6". The air is thick like old stew reheated one too many times. Copper pots swing lazily from iron hooks overhead. Something's boiling on the stove. It smells not entirely dead. Now, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a day here. Between the rats, the spoiled meat, and the fact that every other object is either sharp, rusty, or on fire, it's a miracle pirate cooks weren't constantly exploding. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Always fun to see how far we're drifting together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wedge yourself through a crooked doorway and enter the galley. This is the culinary heart of an 18th century pirate ship. Such as it is, it smells like dried fish, wet rope, and lard. A little smoky, too, thanks to the cook's refusal to open the tiny ventilation flap overhead. The cook himself or herself, depending on the crew, is usually the second most respected person on board after the captain, or the most hated, depending on how often the stew burns. Pirate cuisine, such as it was, required a mix of resourcefulness, sheer nerve, and stomachs hardened by salt and low expectations. The actual setup is minimal. There's a firebox bolted to the deck, often lined with bricks or iron to prevent the entire ship from going up in flames. Historians still argue whether certain vessels risked actual open flames or preferred smoldering embers. But here on your ship, we'll assume the cook is bold or reckless enough for fire. Everything is jury-rigged. Crates double as counters. The chopping board is just a plank nailed to a barrel. You watch the cook slam a cleaver into something that might be salted pork, or might be the unfortunate remains of last week's mystery catch. It thuds with a wet finality. Now, the decor here isn't what you call intentional, but it is revealing. That crusty netting nailed above the stove. It's not ornamental, it's to hang herbs and fish, and possibly keep the rats from crawling into your soup. There are ropes knotted into loops for hanging ladles and broken knives that still get used out of habit. A few of those ropes are oddly frayed. You don't ask? There's something weirdly artistic about how things are arranged. Not artistic in a modern sense, no minimalist brass utensils or open shelving, but more like organized chaos. Dried seaweed is crammed into clay pots. Garlic hangs in greasy braids from ceiling hooks. You spot a cracked turtle shell being used as a fruit bowl. The fruit is a little suspect. And of course, there's the ever-present barrel of hardtack. That miserable, teeth-chipping biscuit that could outlive a cannonball. Most of them are etched with crude carvings, skulls, ships, initials, pirate graffiti. It's their version of Yelp reviews, maybe. You run your fingers along the soot-blackened walls. Someone scratched a calendar here, just tally marks under days since last decent meal. Spoiler, they've stopped counting, but not everything's grim. There's a weird warmth here. A kind of camaraderie. The galley is where pirates argue, gossip, and occasionally scheme. If you want to hear what the quartermaster really thinks about the captain's latest plan, you hang out near the salt barrel. One fun fringe detail, some galleys had their own mascot. A goat, a monkey, maybe even a parrot that refused to shut up. The cook might keep a chicken or two back here as living larders. You make eye contact with one. It looks away, slowly. And then there are the smells. Lord, the smells. Some days, it's spicy and savory like stew seasoned with actual cloves or dried citrus from a raided merchant ship. Other days, it's rancid meat and whatever that green fuzz is growing on the back shelf. You'd rather not ask. There's also the ship's rolling motion. You'll notice it more here than anywhere else. Pots clink. Liquid slush. The occasional onion rolls past your foot like it's trying to escape. You'll have to steady yourself constantly, especially if you're carrying a pot of boiling water, which, frankly, you shouldn't be trusted with. And the floor. Sticky. Always sticky. Whether it's spilled grog, grease, or the vague essence of fermented eel is anyone's guess. But in a weird way, it works. Pirates weren't known for luxury, but they were known for making the most of what they had. And what they had, more often than not, was a bunch of stolen goods, strange ingredients, and enough room to drown the regrets of last week's failed boarding. So you settle in, grabbing a crust of bread from a sack that smells vaguely of mildew. The cook gives you a nod, wiping their hands on an apron that's seen more blood than most surgeons. You've survived your first few minutes in a pirate galley. And while it's not exactly Michelin star dining, it's oddly comforting. Welcome to dinner prep. High seas edition. You crouch a little lower now, the beams are lower back here, and you've already clocked your forehead once. The air thickens with smoke and something faintly metallic. As your eyes adjust, you notice something strange in the corner and arrangement. That, at first glance, looks like junk. On closer inspection, it's something closer to charm, decoration, superstition, all of the above. There's a string of beads looped around the firebox. Not fancy pearls or anything you brag about import, but mismatched glass baubles, some chipped, others cloudy with age. A couple even look like they were once rosary beads, now repurposed for more earthly concerns. Hanging among them is what appears to be a small, shriveled animal paw, a raccoon's, maybe a monkey's. You give it a wide berth. Pirates, despite their rugged image, were incredibly superstitious, especially when it came to food and the spaces where it was made. You spot a piece of coral nailed to the wall next to the salt barrel. It's believed to ward off sickness, not because of any nutritional merit, just because someone's grandmother swore it did. And that's enough for this crew. Above the chopping board is a dagger stuck point first into a beam. Not for defense, though, that wouldn't be out of the question, but rather as a kind of charm against bad luck. Some ships even had what they called galley gods, a mishmash of deities, trinkets, and carved figures jammed into niches, watching over meals with wooden eyes. One particularly strange object dangles from a bit of twine, a child's doll head, just the head. Cracked porcelain, grimy smile. You don't ask. You just hope it wasn't once part of a passenger's belongings. Historians still argue whether such objects were purely superstitious, personal mementos, or just the result of long hours at sea warping taste. The truth is probably somewhere in between. You step carefully around a crate stacked with bones. Yes, bones. Some from meals past. Others, less clear. They're scrubbed clean and arranged in peculiar patterns. The cook says they're weather charms. You don't challenge that. Not here. Not when the cook has both the cleaver and the audience of a very superstitious crew. A fringe detail you'd never expect. Some pirate galleys reportedly featured stolen religious artifacts. Not entire relics, mind you, though. There is a tale of a cook who used a saint's finger bone to stir porridge. More commonly, it might be a purloined crucifix or a defaced icon nailed to the bulkhead. One man's sacrilege is another man's pantry guardian. And amid all of this chaos, these oddments and rituals, there's a kind of system, a rhythm. Certain items always hang in the same spot. Herbs dry in their designated crevices. A shelf filled with salt is refilled like clockwork. The cook always taps the side of the firebox twice before lighting it, every morning, without fail. You observe a small chalk drawing smudged into the side of a barrel. It looks like a fish, but with wings. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe it's something deeper. Maybe someone just drew it during a long, rum-fueled night shift. That's the thing about pirate kitchens. They're not just places for cooking. They're shrines, memory palaces, junk museums. Each odd object tells a story, even if no one remembers what it is anymore. And you'd better believe the crew has opinions. One pirate refuses to eat unless he sees the lucky spoon on its hook. Another swears the stew tastes worse if the bead string isn't exactly 5 loops. You think they're joking until you see the mutiny in their eyes when something's out of place. There's a dried seahorse mounted in a tiny wooden frame, stolen from some coastal market, perhaps a symbol of safe passage maybe, or just something the cook thought looked neat. You wonder how many of these pieces were taken as trophies, or how many were added by former cooks long gone, but still haunting the galley with their odd aesthetic choices. Even the pots and pans have personality. One has a crude face, hammered into the bottom, eyes wide and screaming. Another has a name scratched into the rim, Modeline. You get the feeling no one really knows who Modeline was, but the pot's still treated with a kind of reverence. It's used only for fish stew, and never washed on Thursdays. That's the kind of logic you learn here. Not scientific, not logical, but deeply felt, emotional, rooted in habit and fear and a desire to bring some control to the madness of life. At sea, the galley may be filthy, but it's also sacred, in its own way. And as you lean back, careful not to touch the mystery bucket behind you, you feel it, that strange mix of danger and comfort, the soft rattle of beads overhead, the stink of garlic and rust, the warmth of the fire, the knowledge that, for all its roughness, this place is looked after. Decorated even, in the pirate sense. You stretch your legs a little, shifting closer to the low shelf where most of the ingredients are kept. Shelf might be a generous word, it's really a plank balanced across 2 barrels, sagging slightly in the middle and stained from centuries of mysterious leaks. But here's where things get truly exciting, because this right here is where you discover the wild and worldly side of pirate kitchen style. The first thing that catches your eye is the spice tin. It's a battered metal box, dented and soot black. But when the cook lifts the lid, a puff of aroma rises that nearly knocks you off your feet. Cloves, cardamom, star anise, black pepper so potent it could be weaponized. You sneeze twice and blink into the smoky air. These spices didn't come from the local convenience store. Obviously, they came from all over. Plundered from merchant ships off the coast of India. Snuck out of markets in Zanzibar. Traded for rum and obscure Caribbean ports. Pirates were nothing if not global opportunists. And their food, especially their seasoning, reflected that eclectic, grab-what-you-can lifestyle. Even something as humble as salt had a story. Some ships harvested it themselves, scraping crystalline flakes from shallow lagoons. Others stole barrels of it from Spanish galleons. Each grain flavored faintly with conquest and sea air. One cook on your ship insists the best salt came from a cave in Madagascar. Another swears by the flaky stuff they scooped off a drowned English sloop. Historians still argue whether pirates had preferences for specific origins or just went with whatever didn't smell too fishy. Speaking of fishy, you notice something hanging above the firebox, a small skull, grinning down at you with empty eye sockets. Not human, not even dog. A monkey, maybe? It's been cleaned, bleached by sun and smoke, and now dangles from a bit of cord wrapped in green silk thread. It's got style. In a very morbid sort of way. The cook sees you eyeing it and grins. Good luck charm, they mumble. Also keeps the stew from sticking. You're not sure how that works, but you nod like it makes perfect sense. Around the galley, little displays of personal flair start to emerge. A spoon with a carved handle, someone's initials burnt into the wood. Bowl painted with swirling red patterns, obviously swiped from a much wealthier table. Even a cup made from the base of a coconut, etched with something that looks vaguely like a sea serpent giving you the finger. Each pirate brought something with them, some tiny marker of where they've been, who they used to be, or who they hope they weren't anymore. The result is a kind of improvised art show, a gallery of survival and stolen things. And let's not forget the fabrics. Pirates, believe it or not, were magpies for texture, color, shine. That ratty towel draped over the rum cask? It used to be an embroidered table runner from a Portuguese governor's estate. The curtain tied around the spice rack, once part of a noblewoman's gown, if the legend is true. You reach out to touch it, it's softer than you'd expect, even after all the salt and smoke. Fringe detail for you. Some pirate cooks kept hand-painted recipe slates. Not with actual recipes, you won't find roasted duck with mango reduction here, but more like reminders. Boil rice 3 turns. Don't cook turtle meat in fish pot. And once, no lemon equals angry captain. Each line tells a story. Each mistake, immortalized in chalk. You glance back at the spice tin. Some of the jars are labeled in different languages: Arabic, Dutch, even Chinese. It's a culinary tower of Babel. You lift a cork on one small jar and sniff, then recoil. That one's not for food. The cook chuckles and taps a finger to their temple. Keeps the weevils away. You don't ask what it is. Above your head, bundles of herbs sway with the motion of the ship: sage, thyme, bay leaves, and something that looks suspiciously like moss. Not all of them are for flavor, some are for keeping spirits calm. Others keep stomachs firm. One pirate swears chewing a certain leaf makes you dream of land. Another claims it just turns your tongue green. Historians still debate whether these onboard spice collections were planned or improvised. Did the quartermaster budget for saffron? Or was it all looted, gifted, and smuggled aboard in a cook's boot? The evidence points to a mix of both. Pirate ships were unpredictable ecosystems. One week you're surviving on boiled shoe leather. The next, you're sprinkling nutmeg over roasted yams pilfered from a sugar plantation cellar. Either way, the cook adapted. And that's what you notice most here: the adaptability, the swagger. Pirate kitchens weren't pristine, but they had soul. They were patched together like the ships themselves, plundered, practical, and deeply personal. You run your fingers over the edge of the spice plank again, brushing crumbs and dust into the sea air. You imagine what tonight's meal might taste like. Something hot, peppery, strange. Something comforting, maybe. Even if it's just stew made from 3 onions, a conch, and yesterday's regrets. And as you glance around at this chaos of flavor, folklore, and flair, you realize this galley might be cobbled together, but it's rich in its own right. The cook is an alchemist, a magician, a pirate, sure, but also an artist with a cleaver and a tin of pepper from a place you'll never be rich enough to see. The fire crackles beside you, throwing flickers of orange light across soot-streaked planks and swaying pans. You shift your weight and try not to step on the blackened apron tossed carelessly. Across the floor, at least, You hope it's just an apron. It smells like something that once had a face. But now, it's stiff with grease and the unmistakable scent of overcooked fish. This is the zone of the cook, his turf, her dominion, their sanctum. You've heard the others refer to it as the galley temple or, more ominously, the burn zone. And now you begin to understand why. Decorating a pirate kitchen wasn't just about beads and bones. It was about control, about claiming space. Aboard a pirate ship, privacy is a fantasy. And territory is power. The cook's corner is their castle. And that means walls marked with knife notches, spatulas jammed into ceiling slats, and a weird flag made of scorched linen tied above the firebox. It flutters slightly every time someone walks past, no breeze required. Spooky. This little patch of firelit chaos is staked out in defensive design. Don't even think about taking a pan without asking. One guy did once. Now his nickname is Lefty. And here's where things get wild. Pirate galleys had rules. Unspoken, unwritten, but ironclad. Don't spill salt without tossing a pinch over your shoulder. Don't whistle near the fire, bad luck. Don't ever move the cook's lucky ladle, even if it's just to get to the rum cask. Especially then, historians still argue whether pirate ships really enforced galley-specific taboos, or if they were just part of the larger maritime superstition culture. Either way, the result is the same. The galley is both workspace and weird sanctum. Let's talk flames for a moment. You squat down next to the firebox. It's made from cast iron and lined with fire bricks salvaged from God's nowhere. The hearth is slightly sunken, so the cook doesn't have to chase flaming bits across the deck every time the ship rocks. Clever, right? One corner of the firebox has been etched with symbols, some Christian crosses, some you don't recognize. Protective magic, doodles, or the byproduct of long, lonely voyages and a blunt nail. You choose not to ask. The fire itself is an art form. You don't just light it, you feed it, coax it. Adjust the airflow by stuffing seaweed around the base or cracking a side hatch just wide enough to invite a bit of oxygen, but not the entire sea. A good pirate cook can keep a flame going through storm, battle, and boredom alike. It's said that on Blackbeard's ship, the cook once kept the fire going for 12 days straight without relighting it. Fringe detail? Possibly, but you wouldn't put it past them. Around the hearth are various implements scorched into anonymity: spits, skewers, long-handled forks blackened to the point of no return. Some are made from bent cutlasses. One looks suspiciously like an old bayonet. Waste not, want not. And then you notice the art. Not fancy, oil-on canvas art. This is pirate art. Heat-warped tin nailed to the bulkhead, with crude engravings scratched into the surface. A shark eating a man, a ship on fire, a naked woman with a very unfortunate expression. The gallery is ever-changing. One day, a new carving appears, something that looks like a cat smoking a pipe. No one claims it. Everyone laughs. You move toward the hanging fabrics. That's right, this kitchen has curtains. Not to block light, there is no light down here, but to divide spaces. One flap separates the cook's sleeping roll from the storage bins. Another cordons off the spice crate like it's royalty. Each fabric tells a story. One's patterned with yellow suns and peacocks, probably looted from an Indian caravan. Another's just rough sailcloth, stained with what you hope is wine. And finally, you reach the aprons, hanging like battle flags. None of them clean. One's so scorched, it's stiff. Another has tally marks on the front, 57. To be exact. You ask why. The cook shrugs. 57 meals, no one threw up, they say. You try not to laugh, but you do. Of course, nothing stays clean here. Everything smells faintly of smoke and grog. The air is warm, almost humid, with bubbling stew and damp towels. A rat scurries along a rafter and vanishes through a knothole, like it's on a dinner break. You try not to think about how often it dines here. And yet, there's charm, style, swagger. You notice a frying pan polished to a high shine, not out of cleanliness, but because it's used as a mirror by the quartermaster. The cook rolls their eyes every time it happens, but it stays there, gleaming defiantly among the soot. And the spoons, though, the spoons. Long-handled, curved, warped, no two alike. Some have initials. One has a tiny dice carved into the handle. Another has been bent into a hook shape, then straightened again. Pirate silverware isn't fancy, but it's got personality. One final detail: the floorboards directly under the firebox are layered with copper sheets. Why? Because the cook doesn't trust wood, no matter how heat-resistant it's claimed to be. Trust, like cleanliness, is in short supply here. As the ship creaks and the waves slap against the hull, the fire flares softly. A ladle clinks against a pot. A long sigh echoes from someone just waking up for their shift. You sit, tucked in, among the soot and ropes, and realize this is more than a galley, it's a performance space. A fortress, a museum of mayhem and meals. And in its own smoky, semi-cursed way, it's beautiful. You're starting to get comfortable here, which is dangerous. The galley's heat has a way of lulling you, of tricking your senses into thinking you're safe, nestled between clanging pans and the sour warmth of overcooked stew. But now it's time to experience what this chaotic space was really built for, not just the day-to-day gruel, but the celebrations. Yes, even pirates have feast days. Messy, smelly, semi-poisonous feast days. The first thing you learn, pirates celebrated everything. Birthdays, storms survived, successful heist, near deaths that didn't stick. Anything was an excuse for a last meal vibe. And these weren't dating affairs. You're talking fire-roasted sea turtles, stolen yams, boiled goat, fish heads, stuffed with limes if limes were available, and not being hoarded to fight off scurvy tonight. You've stumbled into just such an occasion. It's not clear what the event is. Someone mumbled something about old One-Eye's 10th year without falling overboard, but the kitchen is buzzing. The cook is already shouting, not angrily, just to be heard over the general clamor. You sidestep a swinging pot of something orange, then duck as a crewman tosses a loaf of hardtack like it's a discus. This isn't your average dinner prep. This is full chaos mode. Over. In the corner, someone's crushing spices with the butt of a pistol. There's flour in the air. A string of sausages, origin unknown, possibly mythical, hangs drying near a lantern. They're strung with ribbons, a rare decorative touch. One is clearly a stolen hair tie. You get assigned a task, peeling yams with a blunt knife that's more rust than steel. The yams themselves are questionably soft. Still, you work with what you've got, and what you've got includes sea salt, ginger, a rare treat, and a little slab of something that might be sugar or might be petrified soap. You scrape it in anyway. Now, here's a fun little tidbit. Pirate crews often saved up ingredients for days just to pull off these miniature feasts. One report tells of a captain who hoarded cinnamon for 6 weeks just to season a stolen hog. Another tale, possibly apocryphal, involves a massive blowout feast the night before mutiny. You can't help but wonder, was the food too good, or just suspiciously well-timed? Historians still debate whether pirates had scheduled feast days, like naval vessels, or if it was all improv based on morale. Most agree that pirates weren't big on structure. Surprise, but that didn't stop them from building traditions. Even if they changed from ship to ship. You help stir a massive pot of stew, fishy, thick, somehow grayish pink. Someone pours in a bottle of rum and announces it cures everything. You believe them. Decor plays a role, too. For these events, the cook often adds flair, knives arranged in a sunburst, old flags draped across the bulkhead, even the occasional centerpiece carved from a squash or coconut. Tonight, a moldy ship's biscuit has been cut into the shape of a skull. It's oddly festive. The feast itself is eaten cross-legged on the galley floor, or perched on overturned crates. The cook is honored with the first bite, usually taken directly from the ladle. No ceremony needed. Then it's a free-for-all. Stew sloshing, bread flying, someone choking on a suspiciously spicy clam. You try everything, even the pickled eggs, which taste like brine and secrets. There's a moment when the entire crew goes silent, just chewing, grunting, nodding. The food isn't good exactly, but it's hot and there's enough of it, and no one's been stabbed yet. So that's a win. Then comes the grog. You drink cautiously, partly because it smells like turpentine, partly because you saw what it did to the rat last night. Still, you sip, and oddly, it doesn't taste terrible, burnt, bitter, with a strange aftertaste of raisins. You shrug and drink again. There's singing now. Loud, tuneless, joyful singing. Someone thumps the bottom of a pot like a drum. A few crew members have linked arms and are swaying wildly, bumping into the spice shelf with every verse. A spoon falls into the firebox and is ceremonially declared sacrificed. You lean back, belly full of questionable stew, head fuzzy from grog, and take in the scene. This place that smelled like despair and mildew just a few hours ago now glows with warmth. Not just firelight, but energy, life. As rough as it is, there's a kind of grace to it. Because in the end, pirate galley feast weren't about flavor, they were about survival, about ritual, about finding a reason to laugh when tomorrow might be cannonballs and sea monsters. And you know what? The decorations, for all their strangeness, hanging skulls, tattooed aprons, flags made of stolen nightgowns, they're perfect because they reflect the crew. A little broken, a little beautiful, entirely their own. The fire dies down now, embers glowing soft and red. The stew pot is nearly empty. One last bread crust is passed around like sacred treasure. And slowly, the voices fade. Boots scuff as bodies slouch away, bellies full, eyes half closed. You stay behind a moment longer, watching the smoke spiral up and the last spoon sway from its hook. The cook wipes down a blade, hums something old, and doesn't shoo you away. It's quiet now. Just the groan of the hull and the whisper of the sea beyond. The galley grows still. No more clatter, no more crackling wood. Just the soft tick of cooling iron and the far-off slap of waves on the hull. You lean your head back against the bulkhead, where it's a little cooler now, and listen. The silence here isn't empty. It's full of breath and warmth, and the faint scent of roasted yams still hanging in the air. The hanging beads creak gently. A spoon sways once, then rests. Above you, the faintest thread of moonlight peeks through a crack in the wood, casting a stripe across the soot-smudged deck. There's no rush now, no storm, no orders. Just the ship, rocking like a cradle. Your hands are still a little sticky from stirring stew. There's flour on your sleeve, but none of it bothers you. It's part of the galley now, part of the rhythm, part of the story. And maybe, as you close your eyes, you start to picture the next meal. The next odd little object hung from the wall. The next spoon with a story. Because on the ship, even the smallest things matter. Every item has history. Every crack holds a memory. So, you breathe in the smoke and salt and slowly let it all go. Drift. Now, gently, with the tide. You're safe here. Just for tonight.